This video is sponsored by UGREEN. Hey, what's up guys, Pratima here. Hope you're doing well. So about a month ago, I came up with my unboxing and early impressions of the new M2 Macbook Air. And after using it as my daily driver for all this time, I am finally ready to give my verdict on this laptop. As you guys might already know, Apple's transition from Intel to ARM was revolutionary. 2020's M1 powered MacBook Air was hands down the most remarkable laptop of the last decade. And although I had been a lifelong Windows user, I switched to the M1 Air back then and have stayed in the ecosystem ever since. And it's not just me. The number of people switching from Windows to Mac OS has absolutely skyrocketed in the past couple of years. You might be one of them, or you might know one of them. Windows laptop makers have apparently even lowered their sales estimate because of how just popular MacBooks have become. With this new M2 MacBook Air, Apple has refreshed its most influential MacBook ever. Apart from the performance boost, it brings a bunch of other upgrades too, especially in terms of the design. It ditches the iconic wedge aesthetics in favor of the symmetrical squared off look like the 14 and 16-inch Pros. There's now a notch for the upgraded camera, a bigger, brighter display, the speaker system has been redesigned, and a MagSafe charging is back on Air as well. Sounds great, right? However, M2 Air costs a full $200 more compared to the M1 Air, which I think is a lot of money for the next gen upgrade. On top of this, you can even find the M1 Air for as little as $850 every now and then. And after using the M2 Air as my daily driver for a month now, alongside its precursor, here is what I think about it. Spoiler alert, unlike the M1 Air, this isn't the easy recommendation I thought it would be. Okay, let me start by talking about the biggest upgrade in this year's MacBook Air, which has to be the design. If you were a fan of the tapered look from the M1 Air, that is gone now. But since I was already a fan of this look on my 14-inch MacBook Pro, this was not a big deal to me. Likewise, you might think that the M1 Air is the slimmer of the two, but it's actually the other way around. The M2 Air is both thinner and lighter. Not by a whole lot to make a groundbreaking difference in real-world usage, but still, that's something of an improvement. I also found the M2 Air to be as solid as any other MacBook Apple has put out. Its all-metal enclosure feels premium through and through, whereas the lid is immune to any sort of flex as well. Wish I could say the same about this keyboard deck. Not that it is a horrible keyboard flex or anything, but it budges just a little easier compared to something like the 14-inch MacBook Pro or even the M1 Air for that matter. Now, with the updated design comes improved I/O choices too here. As you might know, it comes with a MagSafe charging, thus freeing up the two Thunderbolt Type-C ports for other things. And its color-matched braided cable is just the icing on the cake. But I will say that I would have loved to see an additional USB-C connection on the right next to the 3.5mm headphone jack. And the fact that the M2 Air still does not natively support two external displays is a bummer as well. Alright, talking about the display side of things, needless to say, this laptop has a gorgeous display. The trimmed bezels make way for a larger, more immersive 13.6 inches screen compared to the 13.3 inches on the M1 Air. And alongside the bigger display, there's also a notch. But unlike the larger 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros with a smooth 120Hz refresh rate, this is still a 60Hz screen. Anyway, the menu bar now occupies that extra screen space while the rest of the apps also get slightly more room to breathe. But it's sad to see that Apple still has not come up with a solution elegant enough to make the notch any less invasive. However, one good thing to come out of the notch though is the webcam. Apple has finally given a proper 1080p FaceTime camera on the MacBook Air, and the upgrade is quite easy to notice and appreciate. Other than sharper videos with better image processing, I am also impressed with the background noise suppression here. I don't know if Apple has made any changes to the triple mic array in any way except the placement, but the M2 Air definitely sounds better. The M2 Air's display is also capable of producing over 1 billion colors, whereas it is 25% more brighter than the M1 Air as well. And yeah, the difference between these two screens is pretty visible. colors look richer with more depth on the M2 Air, which makes your viewing experience just a little more enjoyable. The contrast ratio is also noticeably deeper here, but it's simply no match for the mini LED displays on the larger 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros. But what surprised me here is that the color coverage on the M1 and M2 Air is actually quite similar, with 100% sRGB, 88% Adobe RGB, and 99% P3 on the M2 Air compared to 98% on its predecessor. We also measured its peak brightness at 504 nits versus 398 nits on the M1 Air. Therefore, the M2 MacBook Air can be the perfect laptop to work in a cafe or for someone who does a lot of field visits in their line of work. Also adding to the visual experience is the redesigned speaker system. Unlike the M1 Air or any other MacBook Apple currently sells for that matter, it does not have speaker grills on the side. Instead, its 4-speaker system is located between the keyboard and the display. I did prefer the M1 Air's dual stereo speakers after a brief test in our unboxing video, but the more I listened to this guy, the more I liked it. Yes, the M2 Air is missing that wraparound effect a bit, but the audio separation, the clarity, and the crispness of high frequencies here is undeniably superior. Okay, as for the keyboard, the M2 MacBook Air feels fantastic to type on. The keys are well spaced, the 1mm travel distance is extremely comfortable for my hands, and I like their fairly quiet sound profile too. Yes, some people have complained about the short key travel being difficult to adjust to, but I had no problem with it. Oh, and the function rows are also full height this time. Similarly, Apple's Magic Trackpad still sets the benchmark for one of the best trackpad experiences you could find on a notebook. But one thing I noticed is that the M2 Air's trackpad feels relatively soft, almost shallow compared to the sharp and precise feedback on the M1 Air. Yet, it feels significantly better after switching the click speed from medium to firm. Alright, let's now get to its performance and all the controversy surrounding it. According to Apple, the M2 chip inside this laptop offers 18% faster CPU and 35% faster GPU performance. That's pretty impressive for a next-gen upgrade. But more power also means more heat, which is not good news for a fanless laptop like the MacBook Air. And yeah, it most definitely throttles under heavy load like all notebooks without any fans do. Looking at our 30-minute Cinebench stress test, we can see that the M2 Air loses somewhere around 17% of its performance, compared to 0% on the actively cooled M2 MacBook Pro and just 4% on the M1 Air. So if you're someone who does a lot of 3D rendering or compiling big coding projects, this is not the MacBook for you. Also, because the M2 chip generates more heat because of that extra pinch of power, the CPU temperature here comfortably and quickly climbs to 103 to even 108 degrees, with the center of the keyboard deck and its adjacent bottom chassis getting noticeably hot. The old M1 Air, however, never once hit the triple-digit temperature in all my testing. That being said, under regular use cases, the M2 Air blazes past everything you throw at it. In my everyday use, a few Chrome tabs would occasionally have to reload here because I'm only rocking the base 8GB variant, but other than that, the M2 Air never gave up on me. Also, both the CPU and GPU temperatures stay nice and cool at around 40 to 45 degrees Celsius under such a casual usage pattern. The thermal throttling debate gets even weaker when running smaller projects or benchmarks. Like, I ran the Xcode build test, which measures the system's ability to compile large code bases twice in a row, and the M2 Air was able to maintain its burst performance perfectly fine. Moreover, in my custom 4K Premiere Pro render with heavy animation layers, the M2 Air was not that far behind the fan-equipped 13-inch MacBook Pro. Apple is also pushing gaming on Mac with the upcoming Mac OS Ventura. From developers not launching their latest game on Mac OS to the lack of proper graphics APIs, Mac OS has never been the ideal platform for gaming. But Apple claims that Ventura is going to be the next big thing in terms of gaming on Mac. At this point, I doubt Apple will ever catch up to the decades of head start that Microsoft has, but this is still promising news. As of now, you can play some games like League of Legends on the M2 Air, but other high-end AAA games are just not very good. Okay, let me now address the whole slower SSD debacle. Since the base 256 gigs configuration of the M2 MacBooks use a single 256GB NAND chip instead of 228GB ones like on the M1 Air, their read and write speeds are noticeably absolutely slow. And even though I never really notice any sort of slowdowns on my everyday usage because of the slower SSD, it certainly makes a difference under heavy load, especially when the system uses heavy swap memory. Okay, now basically swap memory is when the operating system is temporarily using the onboard storage, in this case SSD, when it's short on RAM. But since my entry-level 8256GB M2 Air has significantly slower storage, you will notice a performance dip when the system is using large swap memory. In our copy speed test, copying a 16GB folder took the same time on the M2 and M1 Air. But with a bunch of active foreground apps, the M1 Air takes a notable lead. And this difference only gets wider as macOS hogs more and more swap memory. As for the battery, the M2 Air brings a slightly larger unit over the M1 Air. But I honestly did not notice any difference in their endurance. At full charge, it comfortably lasts me an entire workday with 10 to 12 hours of screen on time. Just like the M1 MacBook Air did back when it was still kicking the 100% battery health. As for juicing it up, the included 30-watt MagSafe 3 charger takes a little under 2.5 hours to fill it up to 100%. That's pretty slow for a 2022 laptop, which is why I have been using this UGREEN's 100-watt GaN power strip since the M2 Air also supports 67-watt fast charging. This 7-in-1 power cord lets me plug in a bunch of electronic gadgets and even devices like TV, monitors, steam irons and such. The 4 USB ports up front can push up to 100 watts of power, while the 3 AC outlets can draw up to 1870 watts. Talk about versatility. Likewise, besides using GaN technology for better efficiency, it also has 6 layers of protection, including surge protection, for my peace of mind. For more information, do check out the link given in the description below. Okay, let's wrap up this video now. For me, the M2 MacBook Air is one heck of a portable machine, I can't deny that. From its overhauled design, its nicer display, better speakers and webcam, to the all-new M2 Silicon, there's a lot to love about this machine. But as I've discovered throughout this review, the $200 cheaper or occasionally even $350 cheaper M1 Air from 2020 is not that far behind. In certain cases, it even pulls off a healthy performance leap. So if you don't really do much on a computer and if absolute value for money is what you're going for, the M1 MacBook Air is still the way to go. And even if you're thinking of getting the M2 MacBook Air in case you're a heavy user, at the very least you would require 16GB of memory and 512 gigs of SSD. And that configuration costs you a cool $1,700, which is just $300 shy of the M1 Pro-powered 14-inch MacBook Pro. And that machine is on a whole different level, like in every aspect that you can imagine. Maybe not in terms of portability, but that's not saying much. The thing is, it's actually a proper pro laptop for creators. So while the M2 Air is not inherently a bad laptop in any way, the problem is that it is sandwiched between two of the most influential MacBooks Apple has to offer. But if you can justify all its upgrades with the $200 price jump over the M1 Air and don't want to go all in with the 14-inch M1 Pro, this is still a solid everyday notebook. That SSD issue I discussed earlier is something to worry about, so I would recommend getting the 512GB model so that it will age better over time. So guys, that was all for my full review of the M2 powered MacBook Air. We will be coming up with more informative videos like this one, so stay tuned for that and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Till then, I'm Pratima and thank you so very much for watching.